In honor of Part 9/11, here are the most morbid facts I've ever posted about 9/11. In 1983, professional climber Dan Goodwin illegally climbed the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He said he was trying to bring attention to the inability to rescue trapped occupants of the upper levels of skyscrapers. In August of 2001, actor James Woods reported 4 suspicious men on his flight, but authorities didn't take his claims seriously. Turns out there were 4 of the hijackers who would go on to crash into the World Trade Center, and this was one of their test runs. Afghan resistance leader Ahmad Shah Massoud warned about a major terrorist attack that was about to happen on U.S. soil, but he ended up being assassinated just 2 days before 9/11. An FBI counterterrorism expert John O'Neill urged the federal government to take the threat of Al-Qaeda more seriously, but he was eventually pushed into early retirement due to disagreements with the Bureau. He went on to head security at the World Trade Center, where he was killed on 9/11. Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg were both booked to fly on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane that crashed into the World Trade Center. But Wahlberg decided last minute to fly to Toronto instead, while MacFarlane missed the flight by 10 minutes due to a hangover. Released in June of 2000, video game Deus Ex didn't include the World Trade Center in its skyline due to technical limitations. The in-game explanation was that they were destroyed in a terrorist attack. In August of 2000, the band Dream Theater recorded a live studio album called Live Scenes from New York. The album cover art features the New York City skyline with the Twin Towers on fire. Most disturbingly, the album was quickly pulled from shelves after coincidentally being released on September 11, 2001. Only one non-military plane was allowed to fly after all commercial flights were forced to land. It was delivering anti-venom to a snake handler in Florida who was bitten by the highly venomous taipan snake. Sculptor Michael Richards was killed in his art studio on the 92nd floor of the North Tower on 9/11. His art ironically focused on planes, including a sculpture of airplanes piercing a cast of his own body. This iconic photograph of 28-year-old Marcy Borders covered in dust was taken just after the World Trade Center collapsed. Marcy was a bank teller who worked on the 81st floor of the North Tower. She survived the collapse but sadly died from cancer in 2014, likely caused by the toxic fumes she was exposed to. The only off-duty NYPD officer who was killed in 9/11 had signed his retirement papers that morning, but instead of leaving his badge, John William Perry decided to pick it up one last time. Here's a photo of Pork Chop the search dog receiving fluids and comfort before returning to his duties. Many 9/11 rescue dogs were becoming depressed because they weren't finding any live bodies. Rescue workers had to constantly bury themselves to trick the dogs into thinking they were actually saving someone. Tanya Head was a well-known 9/11 survivor who faked being in the South Tower during the attacks. She served as president of the World Trade Center Survivors Network for years until it was revealed she wasn't even in the country on 9/11. Known as the Meteor, this was the result of 5 floors of the World Trade Center being compressed together after the towers collapsed. It's not known if there are any human remains inside. Long after the cleanup, body parts were still being recovered. In 2006, the arm of a victim was found on the roof of a nearby bank. And as recently as 2013, fragments of human remains were discovered on top of a Manhattan rooftop more than a decade after the attacks. In 2002, a 15-year-old boy became inspired by the terrorist attacks on 9/11. He decided to steal an airplane and fly it into a building in Tampa, Florida. It ended up only damaging one office room, and he was the only person that died. Since 9/11, more than 40,000 people have been diagnosed with cancers and chronic illnesses linked to the toxic dust released when the towers collapsed, a debris cloud made up of pulverized concrete, asbestos, fuel, and materials from office equipment and lighting systems. More first responders have died from 9/11 related illnesses than on the actual day of 9/11. Even nearly 25 years after the attacks, victims of 9/11 are still being identified. In 2025, 3 more people were named through advanced DNA testing using tiny fragments recovered from the World Trade Center site. But of the 2,977 victims, 1,100 of them still have no identified remains. NHL star Johnny Gaudreau, known as Johnny Hockey, built a reputation as one of the league's most electric undersized scorers, dazzling fans with elite speed despite standing just 5'9". But in August of 2024, he returned to his New Jersey hometown with his younger brother Matthew for their sister's wedding weekend, a trip meant to be a celebration. While riding bicycles together along a rural road at night, police say a drunk driver attempted to pass traffic and slammed into both brothers from behind, killing them at the young ages of 31 and 29. Prosecutors later charged charged the driver with aggravated manslaughter, reckless vehicular homicide, evidence tampering, and leaving the scene, with the case still moving through courts as the hockey world mourned one of its brightest stars. But just today, after Team USA defeated Canada in overtime to secure Olympic gold, players carried Gaudreau's number 13 jersey onto the ice and brought his children into the celebration, dedicating the victory to him in an emotional tribute that showed how deeply his loss still resonates across the sport. Brett Favre built his reputation on never leaving the field, even when his brain was clearly injured. Over 2 decades, he absorbed countless hits, and later admitted he may have suffered thousands of concussions that were never diagnosed. He said there are entire games he doesn't even remember playing, including big wins and touchdown passes made when he was confused, dizzy, and disoriented. At the time, returning to play after a head injury was often praised as toughness rather than treated as a medical emergency. Favre described playing through ringing ears, flashing lights, and mental fog, classic concussion symptoms that were ignored during an era with virtually no concussion protocols. Painkillers masked the damage, allowing him to stay on the field while repeated hits accumulated. In retirement in 2024, Favre revealed he now has Parkinson's disease, a condition researchers link to long-term head trauma. His famous Iron Man streak of 297 consecutive games is now viewed by neurologists as a warning, showing how endurance in football can come at the cost of permanent brain damage. This innocent-looking photo was one of the last selfies taken of Chris Kremers and Lee Sanfroon on April 1, 2014, shortly before they vanished while hiking the El Pianista Trail in Panama. The photo was taken near the trail's end, where hikers are supposed to turn back, but for some reason, the two continued deeper into the jungle instead. In the days that followed, Froon's phone was repeatedly powered off and on as emergency calls were attempted. On the night of April 8th, her camera captured over 90 flash photos in total darkness. Among them is a disturbing close-up believed to show the back of Kremers' head with strands of hair lit up by the flash. It's unknown if either woman was alive by the time these photos were taken. Months later, their backpacks and skeletal remains were found scattered along the jungle, and the exact circumstances of their deaths remain unknown. In 2017, Brooke Preston was brutally killed inside her home by her longtime friend and roommate Randy Herman Jr. after he stabbed her 25 times. Herman admitted he carried out the attack, but claimed he was sleepwalking and had no memory of killing her. Investigators found no medical or behavioral evidence to support a sleepwalking episode, and prosecutors argued the number, placement, and force of the wounds showed conscious intent. The sleepwalking defense was ultimately rejected by the jury, who convicted Herman and sentenced him to prison for the rest of his life. In 2022, DMV rapper Markel Moro, aka Gunu, was shot and killed in Washington, D.C. Days later, his family held a memorial inside a D.C. nightclub where his embalmed body was dressed in designer clothes, propped upright on stage, and displayed while his music played to a crowd. The invite-only event was attended by family, friends, and fans, turning a nightclub into a viewing space and leaving people standing feet away from his real corpse. There's no evidence Gunu ever requested this, making it one of the strangest memorials ever held for a deceased rapper. A baby named Breland was born completely healthy, but just 2 days after birth, she was kissed on the mouth by someone with an active cold sore. Because her immune system was not yet developed, she contracted herpes simplex virus, which spread to her brain and caused HSV encephalitis. The infection led to seizures and permanent brain damage, another case demonstrating why you should be very careful when kissing a baby. In 1925, Ora Ralph Thomas, an Illinois sheriff's deputy during the Prohibition era, was assassinated by members of the KKK. Thomas was the leader of an armed anti-Klan paramilitary group, making him a direct target. When 3 Klansmen ambushed him, Thomas returned fire, shooting and killing all 3 of his attackers before succumbing to his own wounds. Tara Calico was a 19-year-old University of New Mexico student who disappeared on September 20th, 1988 while riding her bike near her home in Belen, New Mexico. She never returned, and no physical evidence of her fate was ever found. 3 months after she went missing, a Polaroid was discovered in a Florida parking lot, showing a young woman and a boy bound and gagged inside a van. Tara's family believed the woman closely resembled her, noting similar facial features and a scar consistent with Tara's medical history. But the photo was never definitively identified or traced to its source. Tara Calico was never found, the boy in the photo was never identified, and no arrests were ever made. In 2023, Delbert Cornish shot and killed his 18-year-old daughter, Hope Onyx Cornish, inside their home in Caldwell, Idaho. After killing her, he also shot and killed her pet cat. Cornish later admitted to the killings, telling police, "My kids died by my hand." At the time of her death, Hope had reportedly been turning her life around. Family members said she'd been sober for more than a year, was working, and had recently started building more stability in her life. But despite this, Cornish told investigators he killed her and her cat because he was, quote, tired of them being made fun of. Authorities found no evidence of provocation or self-defense and said the killing was deliberate. Cornish later pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. Daisy Coleman grew up in a family marked by repeated tragedy. In 2009, her father was killed when their car slipped on black ice and plunged into a ravine in Missouri. In 2012, at age 14, Daisy was sexually assaulted while incapacitated and left outside her home in freezing temperatures. Despite hospital records documenting injuries and extreme intoxication, the charges were later dropped, and she was publicly discredited, triggering years of vicious harassment. In 2013, the family's home burned down under mysterious circumstances, and in 2018, Daisy's younger brother Tristan died in a car crash, mirroring their father's death. By 2020, Daisy was struggling with severe PTSD, harassment, a reported stalker, and learning she couldn't have children, a condition doctors said may have been linked to the assault. Under the weight of it all, she took her own life that August at the young age of 23. 4 months later, her mother Melinda also died by suicide. Daisy's story was documented in Audrey and Daisy, released while she was still trying to rebuild her life. Here's a video showing exactly what not to do during a grease fire. I don't know if this is a moment of true horror or true stupidity.
Turn it off! Turn it, what the fuck? What do I do? Bro, turn it off! Turn it off! Tanner, hurry up! Tanner, turn it off! Tanner, turn it off! I don't know what to do! Grab it! Grab it! Grab it! Tanner! Grab it! Tanner! Oh my god, Tanner! What is it? Tanner! What is it? Oh my god, Tanner! I don't know what it is! It's nothing!
Instead of standing around like deer in headlights while the fire kept growing, the solution here was actually pretty simple. The obvious first move should have been turning the burner off immediately. As long as the heat stays on, the flames keep feeding. Immediately after that, they should have grabbed a larger pot, a metal lid, or even a baking tray and covered the pan completely. No oxygen means no fire. You don't throw water on it, you don't move it, and you definitely don't dump it across the kitchen. What ends up happening works out purely by luck, not because it was smart. Dumping a burning pan can spread flaming oil everywhere, and that's usually how small kitchen fires turn into house fires. Grease fires look chaotic, but the solution is simple. Kill the heat, cover it, leave it alone.